Welcome to the In Full Bloom podcast. I am your host, Ashley Renee. This is a space where we embrace the power of being true to who we are. We explore what it means to live in alignment with your purpose, values, and voice, because when you root yourself in authenticity, you don't just grow, you bloom. Join me as we dive into real conversations, soulful reflections, and practical tools to help you bloom from the inside out. Welcome back to another episode of the In Full Bloom podcast with me, your host, Ashley Renee. Today's episode is entitled Permission to Pivot: How to Change Paths at Any Age. When I think about pivot, one thing comes to mind. I remember a couple years ago, this was during COVID-ish, the COVID era, anywhere between 2020 and 2022, 23, I think. I had a blog that I had started during the pandemic that first year. And I remember, I think 2021, maybe 22, I'm not even sure now. I wanted to host an event. And I remember, going through the motions, going through the planning phase and doing all the things and gathering all the things. That was a time. Oh my gosh. But I remember thinking, okay, so I'm going to do it. I'm going full force. It doesn't matter what's happening. I was still working full time at the time. And it was a lot of different stressors that arose. But I was committed to the vision that I had because I felt like it needed to happen. And in hindsight, I remember a couple of things happened at the event. And, there were testimonies that were shared with me prior to and at the event that I just knew it had to happen. And in thinking about it having to happen, I remember one of my old friends, old meaning I've known her since we were kids. I remember she said to me, Ash, I'm flying in from Florida because I have to be there. And I was like, wait a minute. Like, it's not, I haven't even gotten anywhere yet. Like, this is the baby levels of, event planning, host of events and all the things. And I was like, if she's flying in from Florida, this event has to happen. Whether it's in my backyard, it's in somebody else's backyard, it don't matter. It has to happen. And I knew what I wanted it to feel like. I knew what I wanted it to look like. But for whatever reason, the venues weren't doing it for me. Like, it wasn't the venue. I wanted the space to reflect a vision that I had. And the vision was to really just have women out in the open, being able to come together, being able to be in a space where they can connect. Again, talking about community, be in the same community and just relate to each other. So many times, as women, we're in the world and it's catty, or it's, we get the scornful looks, or we're not as graceful and gracious to ourselves and to others as we should be. And I wanted it to feel different. I wanted to kind of mirror the relationships that I have with my girlfriends in a more open forum. And I didn't have a venue. And I remember my event planner saying to me, she was like, all right, I'm going to look up some spaces. We're going to do this thing, that thing. One or two people, were like, oh, yeah, of course we'll do it. And, when it came back to the follow-up, they wouldn't get back to us, or they were like, well, And again, I was just a girl with a dream. And I was like, I just want to do this. I'm not a big client. I'm nobody known, quote unquote. And so I feel like that influenced a lot of decision making on their part. But I knew this event had to happen. And I don't remember, to be honest with you, what the first venue was supposed to be, where it was supposed to be. But for whatever reason, it wasn't working out. And I remember maybe like a week and a half before the event was supposed to happen, 2 weeks before the event was supposed to happen, I remember my event planner saying to me, she was like, okay, if we don't have the ideal, do you still want to do it? And I remember saying to her, like, I'm defeated and I don't know. And again, I was working full time still. And I remember coming home from work one day. We had just had a conversation. I was calling her on my way from home from work. And when she asked me the question, I just felt defeated. I was like, Lord, why would you build me up to this point where I think I can do it? I'm dishing out the funds and I'm getting all the things together and I'm roping in a team of people and, all the things. Why would you build me up to this point to then have me fall flat out? Because the most important piece maybe not the most important was really me and the people in the room. But the most important piece, which is the space, I don't have. Why would you bring me all the way here for it to crash like this? I don't get it. And I think it was that same night that we had the conversation where I told her, you know what, I think about it. Give me until tomorrow to solidify. And I remember getting in that night and, you do the things. I showered, I ate, whatever. But the minute everything stood still, the minute I turned the TV off, the minute, everything was off and it was just me in my room chilling, I broke down. I completely broke down. I was snot-nosed crying in my room because I was like, this doesn't make sense. Why am I here if this is meant to happen? And if you remember a couple episodes ago, I said sometimes it may feel like we're tripping over our feet. We're in that moment where everything feels like it's like we're in a dungeon, basically. We can't find a way out. It feels like we're just constantly being beaten and the fire is underneath us and we're constantly being burned. And in that moment, I felt burned. I felt like, Lord, you're playing in my face right now and it doesn't make sense. And I cried my tears. And, I spoke to God in a very real way. And I was like, bro, you're playing with me. Cut it out. In that moment, I remember thinking to myself, like, this would be so nice if I had, a little boo thing so he could just comfort me. And I was just seeking all the other answers, all the other reasons why. I was just looking for something to grasp onto because I was almost at the depths of despair because I was like, I want this event to happen. I know why I want it to happen. But if I have no venue, it can't. What am I going to do? Put the people, in my backyard and then we're all on top of each other in the grass? That's not cute. And I remember crying that night. And I to be honest, I let it go for a second and I was like, you know what? It is what it is. I'm over it. Maybe it shouldn't happen. Maybe, you list all the reasons why and you get all negative and pessimistic. And I was going through it. And I don't remember what the turning point was or when the turning point was. But I do remember calling my event planner back in that 24 hours and saying to her, it has to happen. I don't care where we do it. It's going to happen. And she said, okay. All right, that's all I needed. Let's get to it. She was like, I'll find you another space. I'll find you. Where do you, we started looking, we started getting to it. And this is 2 weeks before the event. I've never planned an event before. I never done anything to this extent where it was all me by myself, having the vision, having the provisions to make it happen. I had never done this before. So I was running against the clock. I was like, this needs to happen. I need a space. I don't know where to look. My event planner is doing her best. We want to stay within a certain budget. And we found what I think was the perfect space. And perfect meaning it was spacious, to say the least. It's an understatement to say that. I think I had more space than I had people. It afforded me the opportunity to feed into people. It afforded them the opportunity to mingle with each other, to have fun, to just be themselves. Yes, everybody came dressed up and looked cute, but we danced, we laughed. I spoke, a couple of people gave testimonies about the blog and what it was doing for them at the time. And even after the event, I realized that sometimes in life we have to pivot. We have to move away from the things that we think need to happen. We have to move away from the things that we want to happen. I may have been stuck on a particular event space because I felt like it was amazing, or I felt like it was cute, or, it had the perfect parking. But I realized too that sometimes when you pivot and you do the things that are unexpected, or you do the things that may seem unconventional at the time, people will still show up. People will still support. People will still do their part. Sometimes a pivot honestly causes for things to run a little bit more smoothly. The things and the thoughts that you had of how it was going to work out, how it's going to be, maybe people are going to be annoyed, and we always think of the worst case scenarios, but sometimes the pivot allows you the best case scenario to happen. And then when you look back and in hindsight, you're able to say, oh my God, but it actually worked out. Actually, it worked out better than I anticipated. Actually, the people were happier. Actually, and there are all these epiphanies that happen after you pivot. But I'm saying that to say, I gave myself permission to pivot in that moment because I knew that the outcome that I wanted, I knew that the vision that I had was bigger than the obstacles and the downfalls that I was experiencing. Nothing in life, now that I'm realizing at this age, nothing in life is perfect. Nothing in life is going to be smooth sailing all the time. There are going to be moments when you're happy-go-lucky and everything works out, and there are going to be moments when you hit a wall and you're saying, I can't do this anymore. I can't function in this space anymore. I don't know how to keep going. And in those moments, I believe it's giving yourself the permission to pivot. I know in my life and in my spaces, in my relationships, I've heard people say like, I'm over this. I'm over the relationship. I'm over the person. I'm over the job. I'm over the career. And we all have those moments where things just aren't what they used to be. And I think that we allow ourselves to get stuck in that moment of, this is not what it used to be. This is not the same. This is not what I want anymore. But because we're not giving ourselves that permission to pivot, we get stuck. And so a lot of times it looks like staying in a season, in a space, in an environment that doesn't serve us anymore. But because we don't give ourselves that permission to say, hey, listen, I got to do something different because this isn't working out anymore, we literally stay in that space and it wears us down. And sometimes you'll see people age themselves because of it, right? You'll see somebody who's in their 40s and they look 10, 20 years older because they're in a relationship, they're in a season, they're in a space, they're in an environment that doesn't serve them anymore, but they're so stuck on, I don't know what to do and where to go. And I honestly feel like it's them not giving themselves the permission, not giving themselves the authority to say, this isn't okay anymore, and I'm going to change it, that causes them to stay in that cycle. I'll give you another example. I recently gave myself the permission to change jobs in the same sphere, in management, yes, but in a different environment. And the decision wasn't an easy one to make because there are a lot of underlying reasons why I wanted to change. But I realized that sometimes in life, when you have experiences that shift you for better or for worse, right? Those experiences may cause you to speed up a decision. And I say that because I had thought about changing jobs for a while. And I say a while, meaning like over a year. And it wasn't until life changed for me, right? I experienced loss in a very great capacity. And I kind of just had a season of, what is life? What is this? What am I even doing here anymore? Like if this can happen, what is the purpose of me killing myself to be the best and do the best and perform? And oh my God, and you got to be the best at what you do. And I just had a moment where I was just drifting away from the work, if that makes sense. I was drifting away from this idea that I had to be perfect and I had to be the best at what I was doing, because life kind of kicked me in the butt for a little bit. And even though it wasn't necessarily physically affecting me, when you experience grief, when you experience loss, when you experience life shifting, sometimes it shifts your perspective. And my perspective was long gone. I was in a season where I was like, I don't connect to this place anymore. I don't connect to all of the people anymore. And remember, I said you have to be in communities. A lot of times in work environments too, you're not going to be in communities where you necessarily, everybody's not your best friend, and that's okay. That is a-okay. But I just got to a space where I had to really think, like, am I okay here? And it had nothing to do with being uncomfortable. Uncomfortability, I think, I'm not even sure if that's a word, I think makes you grow. But I was out of alignment with the space, with that environment. I was out of alignment with who I was when I was showing up in that space. And I knew I had to give myself permission to make that move. I had to give myself the permission to move, even if I didn't have a plan in place. And a lot of us don't give ourselves permission to move. And it can be easier said than done. I know that at the end of the day, I had to make sure, my bills were getting paid. I have a mortgage to pay. I have, other things that depend on my paycheck. Right? I help to influence others, but a lot of that influence too depends on my paycheck. And so I had to make sure that when I made the decision, and maybe not in person, but when I mentally made that decision, mentally made that choice to say, I need to give myself permission to move on, to do something else, to get out of this space because I'm out of alignment, it clicked. Something clicked. I was like, regardless of how I feel, how I'm showing up, of what is happening right now, I am giving myself that permission to move at a certain point, at a certain space and time. And again, I think that is easier said than done sometimes. We may mentally give up on a situation, but it may be harder to physically make that move. A lot of times finances has a part to play in that. And again, as I said before, I've been there where I've had to, like, all right, if you got X amount in the bank, you can do this and that for the next couple months, and right. But I think that sometimes we have to mentally give ourselves that permission to pivot first before we make that move. I gave myself that permission a long time ago, and then I started putting things in motion. If it means that you're moving jobs, right, you may want to prepare yourself. Or not even moving jobs, but moving in a different space in your career. Maybe you're quitting a job, or you want to quit a job because you want to do something more in a creative space. Maybe you're trying to be an influencer, right? There's so many things in this life that I think that we can do, but we prevent ourselves from doing so because we don't give ourselves the permission to do that very thing. So I think for me, it's, if you feel in your spirit that change needs to happen, if you feel in your spirit that you need to pivot, you need to change paths, whether it's just a job move, whether it's a career change, whether it is with regards to a relationship, preparation is key. Preparation is necessary. Again, sometimes giving yourself that permission is the first step, but then you prepare, then you get to researching, then you get to seeing what else is out there. You get to put yourself in different spaces. But I think something that we need to do more often, especially as it pertains to the job sphere and the job sector, is that we interview just to interview. I know one of my friends does this, and I've heard her say it before, like, listen, sometimes I interview just because they granted me the interview, just because it's a moment for me to practice my skills, what to say, what not to say. If I mess up on that interview, when I go to the next one, I know I'm not going to do that again, right? So preparation may just look like getting your feet wet again, getting out there again, seeing what is out there so that you can take hold of those opportunities when they finally come your way. Giving yourself that permission to pivot is not just making the decision, but it's also making that preparation so that you can change that path whenever you're ready. For me, preparation, especially in the job sector, may look like reaching out to old connections. There may be somebody that you connected with in a previous job, in a previous lifetime. If y'all are still cool, reach out to them, see what's going on, right? Going to networking events, preparing your resume. How many of us have a job? We thought we were going to be in that job for the next 10, 20 years. Oh, it's my retirement. It's this, that, and the third thing. I know us millennials be job hopping every 2 or so years because we're like, yeah, I'm not doing this no more. I'm ready. Right? But we also have to think about, okay, the thing you do next may be very different from what you're doing right now. Prepare your resume, get it up to speed. And as I'm saying it, I'm like, oh my God, I do have to prepare my resume. I have to make sure that, as soon as you get that job, put it on your resume so that, God forbid, something is to happen, or you're in that space where some time has passed and you're ready to move again. You're not scrambling to, oh my God, wait, what did I do every day? Right? Prepare your resume, have that ready. Interviewing to brush up on your skills. As I said before, sometimes interviews are practice, not necessarily that you're even looking for the job. And I am in a space where I recruit, or I make sure that people are a proper fit. And I can say that sometimes we get candidates too, and I'm like, girl, now why are you here? People sometimes show up and we can already tell that they're not a good fit. You're doing the same thing when you're interviewing. You're showing up, I hope, in a much better space. You're showing up and you look prepared. You're showing up and you look decent. But you're also interviewing because you're testing out that company's, those people's ability to serve you. You're offering them a service, a skill, but they're offering you benefits. They're giving you time off. They're making sure that they're catering to you as well as an individual. So brush up on your interview skills. As I said before, having a safety net, having that emergency fund. I know that, God forbid, something is to happen tomorrow. I need to make sure I have money in my savings. I need to make sure that my investment accounts and other things that I have on standby are good. Because God forbid something happens to me tomorrow and I can't work, I want to make sure that my mortgage is paid, that I at least have something in place to take care of me, right? Not saying that I can't depend on friends or family if needs be, but you want to make sure that you're set. And that's one thing that I've learned a couple years ago, is that you want to make sure that you have money on standby for the rainy days. A coach of mine used to always say, it's not if a rainy day is going to come, it's when it's going to come. And I am a testament. Again, I've experienced loss recently, and I'm a testament to, if something happens unexpectedly, are you as an individual, and is your family, are your loved ones going to be okay? Do you have the funds set up to make sure that you can take care of things, whether it's sickness, whether it is funeral planning, estate planning, things like that. I'm definitely going to do an episode on that in the future. It's so necessary for us, as especially younger people who are now what I call the new adults. I think it's so necessary for us to realize and know that in these seasons of our life, anything can happen at any given time, and we have to be prepared. Someone said in a training that I was in recently, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. He said emergency preparedness is everything. Always be prepared. Always be ready to go on the fly. Know where your passport is, your IDs, your cards. If, God forbid, your building is to go on fire tomorrow, your home is to go on fire tomorrow, do you have something in place where you can just pick up a bag and go within not even 2 minutes? Fire spread like nothing. Things happen. So be prepared, right? Have that emergency fund. Have those things set up so that when that rainy day comes, you have things on standby and you're ready to go. Plan and envision what your pivot would look like. As I said before, I knew for me that the space that I was in, job wise wasn't serving me anymore. I wasn't serving it, and it wasn't serving me. And I'll be honest in saying that I got to a point where I was just like, I physically feel like my body is repelling this space, and I need to do something different. And so I journal a lot. I wrote down what my next 6 months would look like. I wrote down what it would be like if I was out of a job for a little bit. If I gave myself a month, 2 months to be out of work, what would that look like? What would it look like when money's not coming in every 2 weeks? What would it look like, just for me as a person? Am I going to explore and just take out a chunk of money and say, you know what, this is your exploration money. This is money that you can use to travel or stay local, but just see what's out there. See what is out there aside and apart from the working world, right? I explored starting this podcast and what that would look like if I gave all my time and energy into this platform as opposed to trying to juggle with a job and school and all the things. I envisioned what I wanted this pivot to look like. When I transitioned between jobs, I took some time off. I took maybe 2 to 3 weeks off. And in that time, I was out in the streets. Not like outside. Like I'm not an outside girly. But outside meaning those dates that, me and my friends were planning for months that we couldn't seem to agree on a date. I was out. I had one on Friday, I had one on Saturday, I had one on Sunday, and then I may have been out the state for 2 days the next weekend, and I use that time to feed back into myself. I use that time to give myself permission to do things, to be, to do, to explore. Because I think a lot of times, again, when we're in that stuck phase, we don't give ourselves the permission to move, to be, to see what life is like. Right now, I'm in a space of, I think I've said this before, reinvention. Who do I want to show up as? Right? I want to be that hot girl. It's like, all right, well, hot girls don't sit on their couch and eat ice cream, a couple times for the day. They work out. They eat properly. They make sure that they're serving themselves and their bodies properly. Right? It may look like, and my friends know me all too well, it may look like, all right, girl, it's time to comb your hair. Like, let's dish them 2 braids for a little bit and actually let your hair out. And that's something that that has been freeing me this summer, actually. I have not braided my hair since my vacations. My last time my hair was braided was in June. And it may sound like, but that was just the other day. But for me, summertime used to be like, all right, braid central. I got locks in, I got braids in, I'm doing this thing, that thing. But I haven't braided my hair in about 2 months. And it's freeing. When people see me outside, yesterday I was at work and I had the most wholesome compliment. And I stepped into the elevator and, you do that weird smirk thing. But I stepped into the elevator and at some point it was just me and another lady. And she said to me, girl, it's working. And I looked at her because I was like, wait, is she talking to me? Is she on the phone? What's happening? And she said, the hair, the glasses, your nails, the dress, the shoe, everything is working for you. Like, you look good. She was like, you look, yeah. And it was just so wholesome because I wasn't focused on her. I was zoned out, to be honest with you. And I was like, all right, we have a couple more hours left in the day. I'm going to bang a couple things out, do the things. And then I'm going to unwind when I go home and relax. And I was zoned out. And when she said it, it caught me off guard, but it was just so wholesome. It made me laugh. It made me smile. I said, thank you. But again, giving myself permission to pivot in such a way where I chose, and I had to think about how I wanted to show up, how I want to show up in the world. Sometimes we're stuck in seasons and places and environments where it's like, they know me. They know what I look like. I don't have to dress up for nobody. I'm not gonna. And we don't exert that effort because we think, well, who cares? But right now, I'm in a season of, no, I do care. I do want to go out into the world. I'm a young, single, Black educated, successful female, I should show up accordingly. And this is what it looks like for me. It looks like I'm showing up as exactly who I think I am. And that compliment that I got yesterday proved that to me. So again, planning and envisioning what your pivot would look like. Maybe it's a personal glow up. Maybe it's a career change. Maybe it's getting out of that relationship finally because you're able to say no. Maybe it is stepping into just a new space that allows you to fully be and embody who you think you are, right? So I think pivoting and making changes, making moves are in direct relationship with alignment. For me, being in alignment means being in spaces, being in community with company, right? With people who not just support my visions and my dreams, not yes people, not yes men, but being in alignment with people who share some of the same goals, overarching goals, meaning that they look at life and they see things that they want to change, things that they want to improve to get better. Being in alignment to me is about sharing spaces with people, being in work environments where I can show up authentically. I can show up and be my full self, not have to hinder, not have to pull back, not have to be mindful because I don't know if I can trust this one and this one and this one and this one. And again, of course, work environments, not everybody's your friend, and that's perfectly fine. But I want to be able to show up authentically without being judged for it. Being in alignment for me means I can step into spaces, get my work done, be exactly who I am, exactly who I feel like God is calling me to be, without having to cower, without having to keep my mouth shut, without feeling like I'm being stifled. And sometimes having to pivot or being in alignment with, or being out of alignment, I should say, means that you have to pivot because you're not in those spaces that allows you to be true to who you are. Having this podcast speaks to me. It may sound like mumbling to you, but to me it makes perfect sense when I speak. Of course it does. But having this podcast for me is being in alignment with who I am, being authentically me, being in touch and in creating the space, I should say, where I can share my experiences because I know that others will be able to relate to it, and giving you guys the tools and just my experiences to show you how I got out of certain seasons, to show you how I got into certain seasons, to show you how I made my personal pivots to get to where I am in life right now. To me, being in this space, being on the In Full Bloom podcast, creating this podcast, having this moment is a pivot in life. It opened my eyes to, hey, girly, you want to do these things? You want to say you're this person and you want to be this person in this lifetime? This is what you have to do. So I gave myself permission. I gave myself the permission to not necessarily change a path. Yes, I did in the job sphere, but giving myself the permission to step onto a new path and exploring this podcast and exploring feeding into others again. I've said it before. I had a blog at one point. I wrote a book at one point. I hosted an event or two at one point. This is a new path for me. And let me tell you, starting this podcast was not easy. And I'm not talking about, recording. I'm talking about the simple technical things of loading the episode, figuring out how to load the things to do that. It took me a minute, right? So it wasn't easy, but it's stepping onto a new path. It's exploring new ways to do things and giving myself the permission to do them. So I urge you to think about these things. If you are in a season where you feel like you're dragging your feet, if you're in a season where you're despising your environment, you're no longer recognizing yourself or who you are in that space, it may be a time to pivot. If you are wallowing, right? If you are in a space where you just feel like, I'm burned out, I'm tired, I'm no longer fulfilled, it may be time to pivot. My advice to you is don't wallow in a place or an area of your life that's not working out. Embrace the hard moments, embrace those moments that make you feel like you're spiraling, make you feel like you are crazy for thinking the thoughts that you're thinking. You may cry, you may pray, you may journal, you may be grieving the moment, grieving the job, grieving the relationship, grieving where you thought you would have been at this moment in your life. Embrace those feelings, but don't wallow, don't sit in them. Make sure that you set yourself up to move on. I gave you a couple tips as to what preparation may look like. Dive into those things, dive into those key points so that you can embrace the pivot, embrace the change that's going to happen, because you're going to have to make some changes. So think on these things. Think about what you're feeling, how you're feeling. If there is something that you've always wanted to do in your life, but the fear has crept up or the finances have always been a problem, think about what you can do differently, right? What changes you can make. And they don't have to be big, grandiose, oh my God, invest $1 million into. No, it may just mean investing $5 into something. If it's a podcast, maybe, you don't have money to buy a mic tomorrow because they can be a little pricey. But maybe you have earbuds, maybe you have headphones. Plug them in, record, see what it sounds like, see how you feel, see how it makes you feel. And that's how you start to pivot. You chip away at something little by little. Sometimes you have to cry about big decisions that you have to make, but you make the choice mentally to say it has to happen, it has to work out, it's going to happen. And then you chip away at the things one step at a time. You may invite somebody in, maybe it's a life coach, maybe it's a mentor, maybe it's a trusted friend to help you on that journey. But again, chip away at those things that allows you to embrace that journey, embrace the new you, and embrace the pivot. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope that you got something from it. If again, this is something that relates to you, resonates with you, please let me know by sending me a DM, commenting on the episode marker on Instagram at InfoBloomPod. Send me an email at infobloomthepod@gmail.com. If you're interested in being a guest on this podcast, please don't hesitate to reach out. Again, if this resonates with you, DM me, send me a message, email me. Let me know what you think, and I hope that you listen in on the next episode. Bye.